Coming up today, apologising to the nation for a second time, President Park Geun-hye says she will accept an independent counsel probe into the influence peddling scandal involving her longtime friend. We have the reaction of the rival parties to President Park's address. The ruling party said she was sincere in her apology. The opposition party said they'd like to meet with the president to urge her to reconsider her nominee for Prime Minister. First Korea State Prosecution will today request an arrest warrant for a former member of the president's inner circle who allegedly has links to the scandal. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's a little afternoon here on Friday, the 4th of November. You are tuned in to our lunchtime newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you ever so much for joining us. Today, I'm Mark Broom. We begin with the President's address to the nation. 10 days after apologising to the public for allowing her longtime friend to access her speeches and other documents, President Park Geun-hye appeared in public one more time to offer another apology, while also expressing her willingness to undergo an independent counsel investigation if necessary. For more, we turn to our presidential office correspondent Song Ji-sun. Ji-sun, the president once again apologised and accepted the rising calls to submit to an independent probe.
That's right, Mark. As she did in her previous apology, she began with a bow to the public. And while she was speaking, her voice often wavered, expressing the depth of her emotions. The president said she was very deeply sorry for causing the pain for the recent series of scandals related to her longtime confidant Choi Soon-sil, and said it is all her fault. She said she is willing to fully cooperate with the prosecutor's investigation and is willing to submit to an independent counsel investigation if necessary.
필요하다면 저 역시 검찰의 조사에 성실하게 임할 각오이며 특별 검사에 의한 수사까지도 수용하겠습니다.
If she submits to such an investigation, she will become the first Korean leader to do so. The president also expressed her intent to carry out her duties as commander-in-chief. Citing the challenges facing the economy and security, President Park says state affairs must be carried on and should not be stopped by controversy.
대통령의 임기는 유한하지만 대한민국은 영원히 계속되어야만 합니다. 더 큰 국정 혼란과 공백 상태를 막기 위해 진상 규명과 책임 추궁은 검찰에 맡기고 정부는 본연의 기능을 하루속히 회복해야만 합니다.
President Park added that the nation's growth momentum should not be stopped and the related policy drives must continue as well. The president also vowed greater communication with all sectors of society, from the parliament to religious circles and civic leaders, and vowed to hear their voices and demands. Now, after wrapping up her speech in a very solemn atmosphere, the president approached reporters to express her apologies one more time. The foreign press was also here at the national address. It is now up to the Korean press and the public to decide whether they will accept the president's apology and allow the president to get a grip back on state affairs. Back to you.
Thank you, Ji-sun, for that report, and do keep us updated throughout the day on that reaction from the presidential office. Now, one thing that's got the public even more upset is that Choi Soon-sil is the daughter of a famous cult leader, and President Park may have been involved. Through her apology this morning, President Park made clear that that is not true. However, she did acknowledge once again that she had close ties with Choi, who helped her with her personal affairs. Our Connie Kim has the details on her remarks.
President Park Geun-hye has offered her deepest apology to the citizens of South Korea for a second time, following her first apology last week for the allegations and growing abusive power scandal surrounding her longtime confidant, Choi Soon-sil.
홀로 살면서 챙겨야 할 여러 개인사들을 도와줄 사람조차 마땅치 않아서 오랜 인연을 갖고 있었던 최순실 씨로부터 도움을 받게 되었고 왕래하게 되었습니다. 제가 가장 힘들었던 시절에 곁을 지켜주었기 때문에 저 스스로 경계의 담장을 낮추었던 것이 사실입니다.
However, the president denied any rumors related to her possible involvement with a shamanistic cult or the obscure religious sect founded by Choi's father, Choi Tae-min.
제가 사이비 종교에 빠졌다거나 청와대에서 구술했다는 이야기까지 나오는데 이는 결코 사실이 아니라는 점을 분명히 말씀드립니다.
The president also apologized to government officials and companies that have helped her run the government. Choi Soon-sil is accused of using her connections to the president to force conglomerates to make massive donations to two government-linked foundations.
저와 함께 헌신적으로 뛰어주셨던 정부의 공직자들과 현장의 많은 분들 그리고 선의의 도움을 주셨던 기업인 여러분께도 큰 실망을 드려 송구스럽게 생각합니다.
It is now up to the public to decide whether or not to accept President Park's apology. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now let's cross over to our parliamentary correspondent Ji Myung-gil for the reaction from the National Assembly to President Park's address. Myung-gil, what's the word from the rival parties?
Hello, Mark. Well, the ruling minority party said the president's remarks were sincere and showed her willingness to fully cooperate with the ongoing investigation surrounding the Choi Soon-sil scandal. The main opposition Democratic Party of Korea said, well, the remarks were not much different from her first apology, adding that she lacked the assessment on the severity of the ongoing situation. The minor opposition People's Party welcomed President Park's remarks. The opposition bloc had been calling on President Park Geun-hye to agree to an independent counsel investigation for the case, and in her remarks today, she agreed. They also called on her to explain why she did not interact with her presidential aides when she met with the heads of conglomerates suspected of involvement with two government-linked foundations Choi was said to have controlled. The opposition parties also said they would like to meet with President Park to urge her to reconsider her nominee for prime minister so that a neutral cabinet can be formed. They have already criticized her choice of Kim Byung-jun, a former policy advisor to the late Liberal President Roh Moo-hyun. Meanwhile, the ruling Center Party plans to hold a general meeting of its lawmakers this afternoon to decide the fate of the party's leadership. Members of the party's non-pro-Park faction called on party leader Lee Jong-yeon to resign, but Lee has refused to do so, saying that won't resolve the current crisis. Mark.
Thank you, Myung-gil. That was Ji Myung-gil reporting from the National Assembly. Now we're going to leave the address for now and move on to the ongoing probe into the scandal, which is gathering pace now. Prosecutors are expected to request an arrest warrant for former presidential secretary Ahn Jong-beom today. On Thursday, a Seoul court issued an arrest warrant for the woman at the centre of the scandal for attempted fraud and also being an accessory to an abuse of authority. Lee Min-young reports.
Korea state prosecutors are expected to request an arrest warrant for Ahn Jong-beom, the former presidential secretary for policy coordination, on Friday, before the 48-hour emergency detention period runs out. Prosecutors placed Ahn under detention without a warrant on Wednesday night to prevent a destruction of evidence. Ahn is suspected of coercing local corporations into donating huge amounts of money to two foundations that Choi Soon-sil is believed to have established and controlled. The primary focus of the investigation into Ahn will be to determine whether President Park also played a role in setting up or running the two foundations. Late on Thursday night, the Seoul Central District Court issued an arrest warrant for Choi Soon-sil, the woman at the center of the affair. Her arrest comes 4 days after she first appeared for questioning by prosecutors. She was booked on 2 criminal charges, attempted fraud and being a joint principal offender with Ahn in a crime of abuse of official authority. During the court hearing, there was an intense back and forth over whether Choi was an accomplice to Ahn in the crime of abusing official authority. But the court accepted the prosecution's logic that Choi conspired with Ahn to pressure conglomerates into making massive donations to two government-linked foundations, and then funneling funds into a paper company for her own benefit. Prosecutors say the investigation into the case will continue for another 20 days, and they will move to charge Choi with other criminal offenses, including embezzlement, accessing presidential documents without clearance, and garnering preferential treatment for a daughter during her time at Ewha Women's University. Meanwhile, the prosecution also arrested Chung Ho-sung, another former presidential personal secretary, late Thursday night for leaking state secrets. Lee Min-young, Arirang News.
Now, despite the political scandal rocking the South, a top U.S. diplomat says its alliance with South Korea will continue to function effectively and deter threats from North Korea. Speaking at a Foreign Press Center briefing in Washington on Thursday local time, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Daniel Russel said he has not seen any change in South Korea's national security lineup. Russel added there's no change to the timeline for the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system to South Korea, which is necessary, he says, to protect U.S. forces and military assets. He also said the missile defense system is not a political pawn and is not intended as a threat to others, particularly not to China. The commander of U.S. Forces Korea says the U.S. Advanced Missile Defense System, THAAD, will be deployed to the Korean Peninsula within the next 8 to 10 months. During a breakfast meeting on Friday, Vincent Brooks said that THAAD will be deployed to South Korea in the first half of next year at the earliest. He also said that the THAAD base here will be larger than the one in Guam. General Brooks added that the U.S. plans to double the number of Apache attack helicopters deployed to South Korea to strengthen the defenses against North Korea's threats. North Korea has conducted 2 nuclear tests and over 20 ballistic missile launches this year alone. Now, North Korea puts its survival above all else, which could explain its erratic behavior. At a forum in New York on Thursday, Ralph Kosser, who is the president of the Pacific Forum CSIS in Honolulu, said that North Korea's behavior and strategies are not completely illogical, considering the regime is driven by its desire for survival. He said the regime should not be accepted as a nuclear-armed state, and the ideal approach would be to get Pyongyang to freeze its nuclear program first. He also said that even if Donald Trump wins the presidency, Washington's Korean Peninsula policy isn't likely to change dramatically, especially with regard to the U.S. troop presence in South Korea, which Trump has threatened to scale back or even eliminate. With fewer than 5 days to go until the big election in the United States, the race for the White House appears too close to call. Polls indicate Donald Trump is rapidly gaining ground in battleground states and has even leapfrogged Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire for the first time. Park Jung-hong has a report.
As the presidential race enters the home stretch, the competition is increasingly neck and neck. The FBI reinvestigation of Clinton's private email server has eroded her support, and several polls show many are shifting toward Donald Trump, despite controversies over his past remarks about women and allegations of unwanted sexual advances. The latest nationwide polls by the New York Times and CBS show Clinton leading Trump by 3 percentage points, 45% to 42%. As the margin of error is plus or minus 3%, it's still a statistical tie. Trump is catching up in a number of battleground states, including Pennsylvania, Colorado, North Carolina, and New Hampshire. A joint poll of New Hampshire by the Washington Post and ABC News shows Trump with a 1-point lead within the margin of error. In particular, in terms of electoral votes, pollster Real Clear Politics shows Clinton leads Trump by 226 to 180, but still falls short of the majority of 270. This means the tide could change definitively if Trump takes the leading battleground states. As President Obama joined Clinton to drum up support for her campaign once again on Thursday, Ted Cruz appeared on the trail for Trump. The Texas senator held joint events with Trump's running mate, Indiana Governor Mike Pence, to endorse Trump for president. Park Jong-hong, Arirang News.
Tragedy has struck again in the Mediterranean. At least 239 migrants have died in 2 shipwrecks off Libya. The UN's refugee agency says the information was confirmed by 2 survivors who were brought ashore on the Italian island of Lampedusa. Around 180 migrants were pulled to safety. Survivors said they were put on a faulty dinghy which began to sink as soon as they set sail. The International Organization for Migration says that as of Wednesday, more than 4,200 people have drowned in the Mediterranean this year. That is the highest on record. Officials say the increased number of deaths is partly due to the fact that smugglers are often using rubber dinghies which are prone to deflating, and they also load them well beyond capacity. The leader of the Islamic State militant group appears to be losing control of his fighters amid the ongoing fight for Mosul. As Iraqi troops close in on the northern city there, ISIS released a rare audio message from Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi urging his fighters to hold their ground and make the blood of their enemies, quote, flow like rivers. John Dorian, who is spokesman for the US-led coalition against ISIS, said Thursday that while the authenticity of the recording hasn't yet been verified, it clearly indicates the group's intention to communicate with its fighters regarding al-Baghdadi's order that his troops not fight among themselves. The US official remarked that this is typically something that a leader losing command would say. Crude oil prices extended their losing streak into a 5th day on Thursday, with benchmark West Texas Intermediate crude prices losing 1.5% to settle at under $45 a barrel, and that is the lowest close in 6 weeks. The last time the price ended at that level was September 27th. The drop in oil prices comes amid a global glut in the US crude inventories. It also comes as investors remain skeptical over OPEC's planned production limit. Oil ministers from OPEC will meet at the end of the month to try and agree on a production cap to stem the global glut and deal with the low prices. A port in China has seized another of Hanjin Shipping's container ships because of unpaid terminal fees of $875,000 US, and this brings the tally of seized Hanjin ships now to 5. The vessel in question, the Hanjin China, had successfully offloaded all its cargo in Shanghai and was planning to head back to Busan. The terms of the seizure require that 6 to 12 crew members stay on board for vessel maintenance until the terminal fees are paid. While Hanjin can rotate the crew, it's planning to auction some of the seized vessels to raise the money. But first, Hanjin will have to get legal permission on whether it can auction off its vessels, and that won't come until early next year. The company was put under court receivership in September and had a debt of $5.5 billion US as of the end of June. And that is all we have for now. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you, as always, for watching. We'll be back throughout the day with more newscasts, and we'll have all the reaction to President Park Geun-hye's second apology to the nation for the power abuse scandal. Our next bulletin is coming up at 2 p.m. Korea time. So until then, goodbye.